Ho, ho, hose.
Hey, you guys. Hey, you guys. Hey, you guys. Hey, you guys.
Welcome to the Hey You Guys podcast, and welcome to the first week of our Christmas month. This week, we watched 2005 Santa's Sleigh, produced by Brett Ratner, the director who gave us the Rush Hour series and one of the X-Men's, and directed by his assistant. David Steeman's one and only writing and directing credit, Santa's Sleigh lands us at the end, 1,000-year curse, to be a joy bringer, and he is now free to once again bring the pain. You see, Santa was actually the result of a virgin birth and is the son of Satan. Santa is now keen to seek revenge and once again return to his old ways. But can a cast of predominantly Jewish actors stop the son of the devil before time runs out on Christmas Day? Owen Liam, I ask you, have you ever seen a more jacked Santa in your life?
Well, that's one of my first issues with this film, and I've got a few, to say the least. But they keep making these jokes about him being fat, and I don't know if they're trying to be ironic, but it doesn't come across as irony. I mean, a lot of the stuff in this film does fall a little flat in fairness, but I mean, they go back to that joke 3 or 4 times about him being fat. I'm like, dude, it's Bill Goldberg. He is absolutely hench as fuck. Dude. I just don't get this joke at all.
Jump into the end of the film, right to the end, when he's dressed up as a biker. He is the scariest fucking biker I've ever seen.
Well, sadly, he's scarier as a biker than he is as Santa. And the thing is, I don't think it's Bill Goldberg's fault because he looks the part. And that was one of the things. Like, he's not the most charismatic of actors and wasn't the most charismatic of characters on the WCW, WWE. But what he is physically that was his whole thing. Yeah. Like, he just looks the fucking part. And it's in the outfit and stuff. I'm like, yeah, you see the images, like, man, you wouldn't want to be chased down by Bill Goldberg as evil demonic Santa. But the problem is the film doesn't do enough with him. Like, some of the kills and stuff are imaginative and they are quite fun. But I'm just like, they needed to shoot him in a more interesting way. Instead, this is shot like a daytime soap. And they've just it feels like the Kool-Aid guy just runs through a wall and it's like, oh, it's Bill Goldberg as Santa again.
I love how they seem to just put different, like, Santa's chasing them or whatever, or this film is going on, but every now and then it's like a commercial, it's like an advert. Just to Santa's random death, random kill, kill of the week for Santa. Do you know, like, you're talking about something, and all of a sudden Santa's on a road and he destroys a manger. And
he just kind of pops up, which again, I guess they're trying to go for an almost like Halloween style thing. He just appears. You don't really know how he gets there. He just kind of rocks up, and it doesn't even matter where. It doesn't make sense how he gets from one place to the other. It's just Santa just shows up and kills folk. That's the bottom.
You know how he gets there? He gets there with his hell deer and apparently a sleigh with rockets on the back.
They say this hell deer. The hell deer is like a bison, right?
Yeah, I believe.
Why don't they just say like a hell bison? Because it's not a hell deer at all. It's just the bison.
It's a joke on reindeer, isn't it? Hell deer. They can't say hell bison if he's Santa.
Yeah, but why didn't they just make it a deer who just looked more hellish, I suppose? I don't know.
Did you think the start of this film was going to be, when you saw the start of this film compared to the rest of this film, you thought it was going to go in a different direction? Because you've got him killing James Caan, Chris Kattan, Fran Drescher, Rebecca Gayheart, like all these people that have been in. James Caan is the biggest name in that list.
100%. Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about
all of these people, and like in pretty imaginative ways, and you think, oh, this is going to be good. It's going to be a star-studded kind of thing where, and then all of a sudden, the rest of the film is just random as fuck.
Yeah, well, the start of the film felt like a lot of people lost a bet to Brett Ratner. Like, that's what it feels like. James Caan definitely lost a bet. There's no reason for him to be in this film, but I totally agree. And it's almost a bit of a shame. It feels like this movie blew a lot of its budget in that opening sequence. Like, the movie never tops that opening sequence. Like, you kind of, like you said, you come in like Chris Kattan. I'm not sure how many people know Chris Kattan, but I'm like, oh, it's the dude from A Night at the Roxbury. That's where my head goes, kind of thing. But definitely when you see James Caan, you're like, James Caan from Elf fame? Oh, and I guess The Godfather, I suppose. You're like, holy shit, this is going to be something. And of course, Bill Goldberg just rocks up in the room. And the problem is, all of the most imaginative and gruesome deaths happen in those first 5 minutes. some of the stuff there, it's, when he stabs James Caan in both of his hands with like the turkey skewers and he's stuck on the table, the girl's face gets burnt off and she's running around with no hair. Like a lot of that stuff, you're like, wow, they're going for it. And I thought it was going to be one of those movies that, well, fundamentally quite dopey. It was just going to kind of keep building the stakes and the kills were going to get more and more imaginative. Sadly, that was kind of the peak. And then after that, it's like the violence kind of disappears. Like, yeah, he still gets some decent kills, but none of it is as imaginative or as violent as that opening sequence. And instead, it's kind of just Santa showing up in town with, actors you've never seen before, kind of, killing people, but without much imagination, sadly.
I put to you, stabbing a guy in the neck with a menorah is probably
that wasn't too bad. I've maybe been a bit harsh there. There are actually a couple where it kind of brings you back into it and you're like, oh shit, that is pretty imaginable, pretty gruesome.
Right. You said James Caan of Elf fame. I put it to you that Santa's Sleigh is the best Christmas film James Caan has been in.
You are. I mean, just to be clear, right? I'm not the biggest Elf fan out there, but to compare this to Elf is insanity. Elf is definitely a much better film than this.
Elf, I hate it.
Well, it's an odd one though, because that feels like the difference, I guess, is that is an opinion. You hate Elf, but I could argue on an objective level why Elf is a decent movie and I can understand why people love it, even if I'm slightly more indifferent towards it. I think I could pretty strongly argue why this is an objectively horrendous film, which is poorly, like, it just doesn't get enough. The issues are, it's not funny enough to really be a comedy. It's not scary enough to be like a genuine horror. It's not really violent enough to kind of, compete with the best horrors out there. And it's just, I don't know, it just kind of sits in this no man's land. And I guess it's trying to go for this middle ground. Like the closest thing to it in terms of tone, bizarrely, is probably something like Gremlins, where it's trying to be kind of sweet and, I mean, even like the old man in this film is definitely a nod to Gremlins for sure. But it's just fundamentally not very well made. I mean, you mentioned it in the top of, the intro. This isn't some director you've heard of because it's Brett Ratner's assistant. Basically, Brett Ratner's buddies with his friend. Somehow he's convinced him to be the producer on this film. So they're like, wow, Brett Ratner's the producer. We'll get this made. And you kind of find out as it's being made that he's not actually, let's be clear, a very good director. It's direct, like the direction is so flat. The acting is largely quite poor. The writing's not fantastic. But, you do have a few imaginative kills. And it's a shame because the fundamental premise is actually really strong.
Yeah, and the fundamental premise, the whole thing about Santa being like the second virgin birth, as it were, and then to the devil and things like that. That's all great. And to get somebody as imposing as Bill Goldberg to play it. But that's where the problem lies after that. You've already said it. Bill Goldberg is imposing. As a Santa that's going around picking people up, burning their faces off, doing this, it's fantastic. The second you give him more than 3 lines on a script, it kind of falls flat. He's not a good enough actor at all. He doesn't have... that's why they didn't really give him a mic in wrestling. And that's why he didn't have more than, I guess, 2-minute matches. I mean, the guy went 141-0 for a reason, because he was imposing. But he's not very good at all in his speaking roles. To be fair,
no, he's not. He doesn't have a huge amount of work. I mean, the quote used at the start, "Ho ho hos." I mean, that kind of sums up the level of comedy they're going for. And part of that, make no mistake, is the fact that this was released in 2005. It was a more vulgar time in terms of comedy, but the dialogue across the board. In fairness, some of my favorite stuff in this film, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily good, but some of the quotes really do stand. I mean, that opening sequence, like, "Thank you for making us not poor and not Samoan," and I think it cuts to Chris Kattan, like he's like silently kind of mouths like, "Samoan, like where and like even me, like he was the voice of like the audience where you're like, why is she going after Samoans? I really don't get it, but I guess like it's such a bizarre quote that it kind of works. But you mentioned as well that a lot of the cast in this film are Jewish, and I feel like you need to know that going into this, because if you don't, you'll spend a lot of this film going, man, they're really going after Jews in this film.
Yeah.
Like it feels oddly anti-Jew, but the reality is it's supposed to be in jokes. Like there are a lot of odd Jewish jokes. Like, be careful what you wish for this Christmas. It's like, what are we, Jewish or something? Or what's the other one? Jesus Christ.
No, he's not Jewish.
When he's like, I thought you people didn't even believe in Santa. And obviously nowadays, the idea of saying you people is a little bit inflammatory. But of course, there's a lot of Jewish people in the cast, so it's obviously supposed to be kind of like making fun of themselves to a certain extent. But when I went into it initially, before I did a bit of the research, I was like, wow, they're really going after Jewish people in this film. And Samoans, apparently, bizarrely.
When he gets stabbed through the neck with a menorah, it is a menorah, isn't it? That's the candle.
Yes,
yeah. So when he gets stabbed through the neck with that, and he is able to still be alive to speak to Nicholas for about...
He's off his feet as well. It's holding him up by his throat. Yeah.
Is, like, either that should have... That is the strongest wall, the strongest menorah, or his neck muscles must have been just thick as fuck. Because his head should have got ripped off.
Oh, 100%.
Awesome. And I say as well, right, what the fuck were those dreidels made of? Because I could throw a wooden dreidel as hard as I can and probably not take out a window.
Yeah.
Because when he turns around to Santa and he says, "You messed with the wrong Jew," or whatever he said, and then he started just throwing dreidels at the guy. What the fuck's going on?
I'm not sure what his big plan are there. I mean, even if you take the Santa thing out there, if Bill Goldberg kind of rocks up into your place and means to hurt you, I just run in the opposite direction. But I guess I appreciate he's Jewish, so he doesn't celebrate Christmas. Why is his shop closed, but he still has all the meats in the counter? So anybody who's walking past on Christmas Day going, "Oh, Mr. Green's got meats in that counter." So if we go there the next day, are they still going to be in that counter? Yeah, no, I'm not convinced it makes any sense. Everything about like the scenes in that store, and I forget the name. Again, he's quite a famous actor, isn't he?
Sal Rubinek.
That's it. Yeah. That whole sequence, I'm not sure if it was to try and get in like a vague nod to Gremlins, because like you get the scene with the old lady who shows up.
Yeah. And
she's just horrible and she's smoking a cigarette. And all I could think of, and we spent quite a bit of time actually talking about that character when we did the Gremlins podcast last year, is that whole sequence. I remember in the Gremlins, you watch that sequence and you think she's going to be a bigger part of the movie. Yeah. Because I remember we were saying like she had her own theme tune and stuff, and they're making such a big deal of her being horrible. Like, oh, well, she's going to show up later on in the film and have a big part. And it never really happens. The difference is with this film, when she just shows up, she's horrible and she's smoking a cigarette and she's swearing at everyone. I'm just like, I don't think this is going to have any payoff. I think it's just an odd scene in an odd place where again, I think this movie mistakes kind of vulgarity for edginess. The same with like, it kind of has some like sex jokes, but they fall a little bit flat, to be honest. Yeah. And it like the whole thing has this issue there where it feels like it's being made and directed by a teenager. But the opposite side of that is, I wonder if I had watched this movie, obviously it wouldn't have happened because it came out in 2005, so I was already 23 then. But if this film had come out when I was like, I don't know, 8 or 9, if I'd watched it then, or even 11, 12, something like that, I think I might have loved it. But it's hard not to pick it apart as an adult. That's the issue.
I chose this film not for any nostalgia or anything like that. I literally chose this film to be different at Christmas.
Oh, and this, as I said, this definitely will be different. And make no mistake, like I'm really going after this film, but it wasn't like this film got torn apart by critics. Like, obviously, it doesn't have amazing reviews, but there are a lot of decent ones, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, they liked its like satirical take on Christmas." I feel like they're watching a slightly different film. I don't know how this was being satirical or clever.
Like, were they trying to say as well? This is where curling was invented. The angel and the devil playing, like, because they said let's chuck a stone in. And to be fair, I like that weird stop motion animation thing that they did to tell the story.
It was actually quite charming. And again, I wonder, and I've not been able to find anything in the research, if this aligns with any kind of like Nordic cartoon or something, because it like the style, if nothing else, feels very European.
Yeah.
And obviously, we mentioned it earlier with Goldberg and everything like that. It's like this obviously has like a very European Nordic bent. Like they're really leaning into that. And I thought maybe this kind of aligned with something, but I couldn't find anything to back that up. But I did find it quite charming. However, at the same time, I was like, really, curling? They're going for curling? which I guess like
it's so Canadian.
It is, and that is the thing with this film is that beyond, the Jewish aspect, it feels incredibly Canadian. Like, I know this was supposed to be America, and it's set in Hell Township. Now, there is an actual Hell Township in Michigan.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, is that where this is supposed to be set officially? I don't know.
No, it's not. No. Oh, what's set? It wasn't filmed in it. It was filmed in a small town, and they were changed to Hell Township for the.
Was it shot? Surely this was shot in a Canadian town because it feels Canadian as fuck.
I have it in my facts. So,
it
was filmed in Wetaskiwin, Alberta, Canada.
Okay, well, the thing is, there are a few nods. I mean, one of them, the pastor played by Dave Thomas. Like, when I think of him, I just think Canada because he was part of the Second City television crew with Rick Moranis when they did Bob and Doug. It wasn't so much of a big thing over here. It was like, they did a movie as well. I think it was called Strange Brew.
Do you remember that movie?
Yeah, I do remember that movie.
Yeah.
But it kind of popped back into my head because earlier this year, I went to Canada and we traveled around. And it was one of those things that kept popping up. Obviously, it's something that people have a lot of affinity for because obviously it's mega Canadian. But you'd see all these nods. Like in the same way, if you come to Scotland and you go to like HMV, they'll sell still game stuff as something being distinctly Scottish. It felt like that. Like in all these little gift shops, there was often something to do with Bob and Doug. But the one that really got me, and if anything, I really went down a rabbit hole on this, was Nick's, what was the jersey called? The Flin Flon Bombers jersey he was wearing. Because I saw that and I was like, that's such a cool hockey jersey. I was like, who the fuck are the Flin Flon Bombers? So I typed in Flin Flon Bombers, and the first thing that comes up is a documentary about Flin Flon. And I was like, a documentary you can buy on Blu-ray, the full works. So of course I keep going down the rabbit hole and I'm like, but this is a regional junior ice hockey team. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you make a movie or have a jersey for it? So I was like, oh, maybe the director was from there. Maybe it was shot there. But the reality is Flin Flon is this like tiny little place on the border between Manitoba and Saskatchewan, like quite northern by Canadian standards, this tiny little town out the way. But the whole town are obsessed with their junior ice hockey team. And that team has produced like an inordinate number of like NHL stars. So it's like this tiny little town, all of their junior ice hockey team. And this team is somewhat famous for producing all these famous players. So maybe that was why he had the jersey. But I definitely went down the rabbit hole and suddenly I'm absolutely watching the Flin Flon documentary. So if nothing else, thank you to Santa Slate for introducing me to Flin Flon.
It's been a while as well since we've had a geography by Liam section in this podcast. So we're
well, I got to be honest, I did not know where Flin Flon was when I was looking into it. It was just they were just nod after nod. Obviously, there's a lot of ice hockey in this as well. Yeah. I mean, Santa does end up driving a Zamboni towards the end of the film. I mean, that is. I'm not sure if there's anything more Canadian unless he was eating kind of like, chips and gravy with cheese on top.
I did like that. Like when he's driving the Zamboni and Nicholas shines the light in his eyes. He went, I'm Santa, I'm not fucking Dracula.
yeah, I've got that down as one of the best quotes as well. Yeah. Like you said, it was like, what's that, sorry?
Sorry, I was just saying, what did you think of the two leads?
They weren't too bad. I thought, again, I think they are struggling with a pretty wonky script. But the one who really stood out for me was probably Douglas Smith. There's something about him. He kind of looks like a budget Dane DeHaan. He has that kind of vibe about him.
And he also looks about, usually when we say in these type of films, that guy's meant to be 16 and he is 45 or whatever. This kid looked 12. He's got a bit of a baby face, and I think he's actually gone on to be in some relative. Like he was on Big Love on HBO. Yeah, he was in the Percy Jackson film Terminator Genesis. We won't hold that against him. The Alienist. So he's gone on to have a pretty decent career. And I thought while I was watching it, he was the one who stood out. And Mary, who was Emily the Raven. I thought she was decent enough, and I thought they had some okay chemistry. They never really leaned into it in any great way. That kind of slightly, I wasn't sure if they were going for an unrequited love vibe, or she was clearly more into him than he was into her. No, I was given the thing where he just, I guess he didn't know how to say he liked her. It's one of those things, I guess so. One is clearly more into. Not clearly more into, but the one is more outgoing. She is.
Yeah, she was the one showing all the signs.
She gave him a present that would get him murdered in America.
I mean, that was the most 2005 line. It's like, a gun. I don't want to sound ungrateful, but what are you, fucking retarded? It's just like, that line does not get into a movie in 2022.
No, but
what it reminded me of...
a transformer, but when it's a gun,
yeah,
that is clearly... a copper is shooting him in a dark alley in the middle of the night.
100. I mean, that was the thing, though. They never doubled down on these things because she shows up in that scene and she gives Grandpa that I wasn't sure what it was supposed. What did she say it was like?
It's a Wolverine.
Wolverine, and he lifts it up and it's still gross and covered in hair. She gives him a gun, which obviously he proclaims as being fucking retarded. And at that point, you're like, oh, well, she's really weird. But that's all you get on that. They never really lean into the fact that she's a bit of an oddball. Even then, I was like, is this supposed to be a nod to Wayne's World? Because that's what it reminded me of. You know, when he gets the gift from the crazy girl, the gun rack. It's like a gun rack. I don't even have a gun to say a gun rack. What are you, fucking mental? It really did feel like an oddly deep cut nod to Wayne's World. But
you say like they don't lean into the fact she's weird until randomly you meet her sibling and father.
Yes.
Like just out of the blue. Like they end up running into they're all there to shoot something in the middle of the night on Christmas Day.
They're all apparently doing clay pigeon shooting.
Okay.
So
why did the father bring, for clay pigeon shooting, why did he bring a rocket launcher?
Yeah, well, that was the thing. I was wondering, is there a chicken and egg situation here where they're like, well, we want a rocket launcher. This character's just going to appear with a rocket launcher. Do we need to just sow the seeds early door that she has a really weird family? Because that's what they basically do. They're like, oh, well, my family's really weird. So then at the end, when he shows up with a fucking rocket launcher, you're like, okay, yeah, they did mention the family was weird. So why wouldn't he have a rocket launcher? But yeah, that whole sequence at the end with the clay pigeon thing, it didn't feel particularly organic, shall we say? So no, and that was the issue. I felt like it ended quite abruptly, and there's really no excuse for that because this movie is 77 minutes long.
I know
they really could have had an extra 13 minutes there at the end. I don't think anyone would have begrudged them that.
Honestly, they had lack of story. I mean, did you? When he was talking about the angel, did you put two and two together and think
100%? Yeah, 100%.
I mean, they led into that so easy, didn't they?
I mean, even the little animated thing, like it even looked like the grandpa. I was like, yeah, guys, you're not going to try and fob this off as a reveal now, are you? But again, the end, it really went it really kind of took a hard left into like, oh, sweet and lovely, you know, with him being an angel and being dressed in a certain way. Like suddenly it felt like a made-for-TV Disney movie at that point, or something like Ghost Dad or something along those lines, which is an odd connection because I think the only thing I know the dad from, Robert Culp, is he was in I Spy with Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
But that was the only thing I knew. Did that get a remake with? Am I making that up with Eddie Murphy?
No, you're not. With Owen Wilson and Eddie Murphy.
Yeah. Oh God, that was like that weird period where Eddie Murphy he was swinging for the fences because he made that cop show. Was it Showtime with Robert De Niro?
Oh my God, he did a lot of those buddy cop ones, but around about that time.
None of that stuff worked though.
Not at all. Hey, did you think this film missed the trick? And yes, I know you think this film missed a lot of tricks, but in the animated sequence, they showed that he was ice fishing with two elves. And then they were actually on Santa's side because they were going, Santa, Santa, Santa. So apparently they're around. So why didn't he have elves terrorizing the town as well?
That is a real shame because they really could have gone more imaginative there. Where you've got
like
Santa as like the big bad
side of it as well. Then you've got these little things running around. Yeah.
You really could have done something quite imaginative and have some because when Santa's there, it's got to be this big bombastic scene, but you could have just had two little elves just being shithouses, just kind of causing trouble, and then like Santa shows up and they're scared of him, and it kind of adds to that kind of I don't know, it just adds a bit of variety to the kills and everything else, you know. So I thought as well it was like a missed opportunity not to have evil elves just knocking about town. But
and the mention of Mrs. Claus as well. So there is a Mrs. Claus somewhere around the line who's just like
a long-suffering Mrs. Claus. I mean, you've seen how he treats the women in the titty bar, which we have to talk about because the Secret Titty Club, and I can't remember the name of it. I do apologize, but
it wasn't Gold Diggers.
Gold Diggers. That's actually quite a good name.
I was going to call it the Klondike, which is the most Canadian thing I could have said.
Yeah, that is pretty Klondike. Jeez. But I was like, the oddest thing about that place is the fact that, well, one, it actually looked like a genuine strip club. Like that, like, you know, I think when you watch movies, a lot of strip clubs probably look more glamorous than the reality. Whereas that, I was like, no, that just looks like they've shot that in a strip club in a small town in Canada.
Yeah. Sorry,
but they do
before you
try
go
and
on to it.
Oh, sorry,
Before you go on, while we're on the strip club, and I wanted to finish your point, but I wanted to say, did you notice as well, as a WCW WWE fan from the 90s, did you notice one of the patrons in the strip club? I've only seen this film once before, so I didn't notice it, but I noticed it today. Vince Russo.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah. Vince Russo, for anyone outside of me and Liam that doesn't know, controversial writer for WCW and WWE who did a lot of all the crap storylines and things like that. But yeah, he was a patron in the strip club.
No, I don't think I would have noticed him. I know the name, but I'm not sure if I would have picked him out. Like, even now, I'm like, I can't picture him in my head. But that's, again, a cool little nod. And I'm not going to, like, maybe I was looking at the array of topless, you know, strippers. There was a lot. Which, again, this whole idea about how this is, like, tonally inconsistent. Like, I'm not quite sure what they're going for. Are they going for, like, you know, kind of, a bit of family fun, kind of horror comedy, or are they trying to be, like, a full-on R-rated horror with a little... I don't know. But... but regardless of that, the oddest thing is the fact that this tiny little place has a valet. Like, this place does not have a valet. I'm not having it. I'll accept one, you know, poorly prepared security card for sure, but a valet, I mean, Jesus Christ.
And it was 2 more security guards inside, mind.
Yeah, I think they're going a little bit overboard.
I did like the scene where he was going to get the stripper pole, but realised the woman had just slid down it.
Oh my god! So he sprayed it and gave it a clean.
Yeah. Like, where did he get the spray and the wipe from?
Fuck knows. There are so many odd questions. There's so many questions this movie makes no attempt to answer. Again, we'll put it down to the 77-minute running time.
That was a piece of coal he made really hot and burned the club down with.
Yes.
Yeah. So he just carries hot coals with him, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. And, you know, he has his, like, Santa bomb later on. I'm not sure if, again, they leaned into any of that stuff quite enough. I just feel like they could have spent more of the time with just him killing people. Probably would have been a bit more fun. But it feels like the film is kind of like they spent all their budget on the opening sequence, and then they spent the remainder on the snowmobile chase at the end.
Yeah,
because there are actually some pretty cool stunts at the end. Like, some of the stuff they do with the snowmobile, you're like, well, they've obviously put in some effort there. There's some money behind this. But then there's a whole section in the middle where they're like, guys, we haven't got much money left. we're just gonna do what we can, but it's not going to be particularly imaginative, sadly.
I also want to know the workings behind a nutcracker gun.
Yeah.
Or how the fact that he didn't know his granddad built that Santa shelter. Like, that fucking thing, it was dug out, apparently.
Yeah.
Steel door. Like, he didn't know his granddad built a Santa shelter.
Yeah, what do you think this is, the Shawshank Redemption? You think that he did that with a spoon over 20 years? It's like, no, he got in a digging crew.
Yeah.
He got, like, how many people would you need to build that bomb? It's basically a bomb shelter under your house. And it's like, oh, when did you do this? It's like, oh, you didn't notice the fucking army of, you know, tradesmen doing this work in the last couple of years? You absolute psycho.
It's probably the same people Batman hired to do his Batcave, and then at the end of it, shh, don't tell anybody. It's a secret.
Yeah. Just keep it to yourselves in this small town. Like, everyone's not fucking talking about it. Yeah, it's very odd. And, you know, even the stuff with Grandpa, I don't quite know what they're going for. And some of it feels like, again, another nod to Gremlins where he's an inventor. So you end up, you know, they're trying to explain away this nutcracker. And I'm not sure if, like, the idea was first, let's make him an inventor like the dad from Gremlins, or we need to have an excuse to have this weird nutcracker gun thing at the end, which led to one of the worst lines where he's like, chest nut.
Yeah, I
because
know.
He shot him in the chest with a nut.
It was
like, oh, dude, what the fuck?
It was the Die Hard scene as well, wasn't it? Where he pulled it out from his back. The one shot, grabbed the gun, pulled it out, took a shot. I know it was in his backpack, but...
I mean, the action scenes are horrendously shot in this film, but did you find... And I'm not sure... Like, at first, I thought it was like an issue with my internet connection or something, but when you're watching a lot of the action sequences, they look very strange. It almost looks like there's a stutter to everything. And I'm not sure if it was, like, you know, there's like a digital element to some of the special effects, but when I was watching it, at least, and this is on Amazon, so there's no reason for it.
Yeah.
It only seemed to stutter during the action sequences, and I just couldn't figure out the hell was going on there. But
didn't notice that.
Okay, maybe it's just me. So we won't go too far down that route.
Randomly. It was, what the fuck was Tom Tiny Lister doing in here?
Yeah, again, for like one really odd scene,
that was
slightly ill-conceived.
That was literally just to have the police scanner so he could get to Mr. Green's on Christmas Day. Because why is he going and on Christmas Day? And I appreciate, Christmas isn't the same for me, blah, 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 because of my granddad. But why is he going to a petrol station on Christmas Day for a pack of chewing gum?
Yeah, and there's that whole thing about them being like unique chewing gum, and the whole scene feels like, I don't know, there's an in-joke we're not aware of. And, when Sonny Lister like shows up, it's just another one of the examples of Dave Steinman clearly knows a lot of relatively famous people because of his work, the fact that he's assistant to Brett Ratner. Because if you look at his IMDb, the first thing you'll see are a lot of big names. You're like, holy shit, this guy worked on Red Dragon, Rush Hour 2, Castaway, What Lies Beneath. But then you realize in every single category, it just says additional crew. And you're like,
assistant to Mr. Ratner.
Yeah. And suddenly you're like, you're a multiple Champions League winner, but you were like the water boy. But you know all the fucking players and stuff. So I can only assume it's like anyone he's being able to convince to put in this film. He's like, well, I'm going to have them in there because it's a name. And that feels like one of those where with Sonny Lister, where you're just like, there's no reason for him to be in there. It feels a little bit, again, 2005 when he goes in and it, like straight away they're giving him all the trimmings like, oh, he's from the hood because he's the black guy. I'm like, oh my God, this is so fucking on the nose.
Yeah, they gave him sleeves, so he decided to just take the sleeves off.
There's like weird kind of like goofy rap music playing in the background. He even goes out of his way to mention that this place is crazier than the hood. I say, you white folk and all that jazz.
That rap song that they're listening to in the truck when she's taking him home. And she's trying to do, like, that is the whitest dance I have ever seen anyone do to a rap song.
It's aggressively white, and I mean, I will get, because I feel like I need to save a lot of this for the music section, and I'm not gonna lie, it's not going to be good. But how you can take so many great Christmas songs and just fucking murder them. This might have the worst song in a movie intro, in a credit sequence I've ever heard in my life. And I was quite positive at the start because I quite like, again, if we go back to that intro sequence when he's like going in and killing these relative celebrities, I suppose, it's all running against like very traditional Christmas music. Yeah. And I actually quite like that when it's like, you're seeing all this murder, but they're playing like a traditional Christmas song. But then after that, they go in a very different direction. But we'll save that for soundtrack and score later on.
Just trying to think of it. Because, I mean, as short as this film was, I think that this section of the podcast can be quite short as well, because there's not a lot to mention about it. Santa comes along to get revenge on the angel who, and if we haven't clearly said it, was the grandpa who didn't trick him though, did he? He just beat him at curling. Yeah, like this whole idea, like, oh well, he was really. It's like he'd never clearly played curling before, because that is a legitimate move. You put the curling, like, it's too close to the center. Somebody else has their go, and they can knock yours out. And that's why I think this was the invention of curling. Yeah, I guess so, but he does. I'm not convinced he really learns his lesson. The fact that this movie ends, like, just let that sink in. This horror comedy ends with a game of curling. It's absolutely bonkers. Well, it doesn't really end there, because it's almost like they didn't know what to do after that. Like, they had it in their head that they're like, oh, this movie's going to end with a curling game. But they're like, but Santa's still around. It's like, oh, well, we'll have him shot by a grenade launcher. Where's the grenade launch coming from? I don't know, the crazy girlfriend's dad, maybe? We'll just go with that. Why is Grandpa not allowed to leave the ice rink? Again, what? Like, all I can see is like, all I could think was like, he's seen Field of Dreams, but he hasn't understood Field of Dreams. That's all I could think, because that's it has to be a nod to Field of Dreams, like where he can't, he can't cross over the line unless he becomes an old man again. But instead, he just can't cross. Like, why not? Why the fuck? Just so they can have that kind of like half-assed emotional sequence between Nick and his granddad. Like, and that doesn't work. He would have to have got there at some point anyway. And I did love that Angel's Wings was a pin. I thought that was quite good. Yeah, well, like I said, they had clearly run out of budget. But yeah, there's like a whole bunch of like,
you could see this is clearly in like the director's voice rather than any of the characters. Like Nick, the reason, you keep coming back to Gremlins. The reason, like, Phoebe Cates hates Christmas is because her dad broke a neck, pretending to be Santa and stuff.
That
and
is
he's
still
like,
one of the weirdest but best things in a film ever.
yeah, I mean, that's unbelievable. Whereas in this, the big question is like, oh, why do you hate Christmas? He's like, oh, well, I never got what I wanted for Christmas. I always wanted Castle Grayskull and Optimus Prime and a mini bake oven, which seems to be this ongoing joke, which again falls flat. But I'm like, this kid's 16 in 2005. So he was born in 1989. So he grew up, let's be clear, in like the mid to late 90s. Like he should have wanted a Tamagotchi or a fucking, what are those horrible little things I used to speak back to you? Those little bird fuckers. Not actually bird fuckers, they were birds.
Furby.
Furby, yes, thank you.
90s?
Yeah, they were 90s for sure.
I don't remember them.
Furbies and like, oh, if you wanted like a Game Boy with Pokemon or something like that, I'm like, fair enough. It's like, He-Man and Transformers. I mean, that's barely my generation. I remember wanting Optimus Prime. But these things came out in like 1983, 1984, stuff like that. Why would a kid who grew up in the 90s want Castle Grayskull and Optimus Prime for Christmas? It's absolute nonsense. And yeah, I don't get them any big up.
That's definitely from the writer.
Oh, 100% is from the writer. 100%. But yeah, it's an odd film. As I said, it's a shame that it doesn't, when you think of like the best horror films, like, Christmas horror comedies, whatever you want to call them, and you think of like Day of the Beast is a really good Spanish film, Deadly Games, French movie, Silent Night, Better Watch Out, Krampus, Black Christmas, Gremlins, all these films. A lot of them aren't necessarily brilliant, but they usually do one thing really well. This film probably casts its net out too wide, a little bit too ambitious for the talent and the budget involved, and it doesn't quite nail down anything, and that's the problem. As I say, I spent the whole film thinking, well, it's not quite funny enough. I wish it was more violent. I wish they had gone one way. I definitely would think they should have gone darker, and I think if you take that great concept and you get a bit more talent behind it, a bit more of a budget, you end up with I think you mentioned it when we were talking before the podcast. I mean, it's just Violent Night, isn't it? Is it Violent Night?
I'm literally just about to say it. Yeah, Violent Night. I'm guessing the writers, Pat Casey or Josh Miller, or maybe the director, Tommy Wakola. And I love Tommy Wakola for bringing Dead Snow into my life.
Yeah.
They must have, whether they're fans of this or whether they just found it on Amazon Prime one day, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But they must have seen Santa Slay and said, we could do a bit better than that. Because they have, like, I haven't seen Violent Night yet. I'm looking forward to watching it. But from the trailer alone, there's a scene where Santa sharpens a candy cane to a point and stabs a guy. You get that in this film?
It's straight out of this film. It's like you said, it's not an exact replica because he's not a demon from Norway. He's
there's hints in the trailer. Like there's hints to him just being some sort of Viking. So
but it's similar. Again, it's quite similar, and it's like they've taken this concept and they thought, like you said, we can do a better job of this. And I haven't seen the film, but I'm guessing they've almost certainly done a better job than this. But I mean, if we kind of like jump,
they've cast somebody in Santa who can actually carry it on screen. I mean, David Harbour is a fantastic actor. So
he's a really good actor. And you look at the action sequences, there's clearly more money behind it. You can tell from the trailer, the writings of it's just of a better quality, basically. But to lean straight into like loves and hates of this film, I mean, my obvious love is the solid concept. The idea of Santa as a demon who lost a bet. And they probably won't do that in this film. I actually thought that was really ingenious, that he's so angry because he lost the bet, so he had to pretend to be lovely. Yeah. Like it must have been killing him inside. It's like for 1,000 years, he's got to like sit there through gritted teeth and like be nice to all these kids and give them presents, despite the fact that all he wants to do is kill them all. It's not even like a bad Santa thing where it's like, I don't want to do this. It's like, I literally want to tear these kids' heads off in a very literal sense. But instead, I've got to be all smiles and I've got to give them gifts. So if nothing else, it's a great concept. And if anything, it makes me want to watch that film even more because I'm like, I'll like take the kind of the acorn of that concept and turn it into simply something better. I might as well go on with the loves now, I suppose.
Yeah, go for it.
Number two, I've got down the fact that Goldberg is physically imposing, like for sure. Like he 100% looks the part. He is an absolute giant of a man. I do think it's a bit of a shame that they didn't have a bit more faith in him. Because like we said, he's not the greatest actor, but there are points in this film when I'm pretty sure all he's doing is hissing at people. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I was like, oh, we haven't got a line for you. So if you could just hiss aggressively at people, that would be fantastic. So it's, like I said, even though he's not great, I still think he was wasted, which is a shame because I think he just looks like the suit looks cool. He's an absolute giant. He looks scary, but they don't do enough with either the dialogue or the way that they actually shoot him to make him look as scary as he probably should have been. And I also really like the cold opening. I went into this film. I mean, I know it's a horror Christmas comedy. I know there's going to be violence, but when I saw James Caan at the dinner table and all this bizarre selection of like C and D-rate celebrities and then just immediately getting killed by Goldberg with no explanation whatsoever, I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. And it's arguably the best bit of the film. So I did really love the cold opening. But the other one, if I was going to sneak one in, I know I said it's a bit of a mess in terms of tone, but when it does get it right, that combination of like vulgarity and wholesomeness, a la, Gremlins at its best, I suppose, it hints at a film that this could have been. So there are moments when it does come together, despite all the criticisms I may have had.
You've hit 2 out of 3 for me as well. So Bill Goldberg, I said it at the beginning, he is a jacked Santa. He is hench.
Well, despite the fact that everyone keeps calling him fat. Again, I'm still not sure if it's an in-joke. I spent far too much of that film thinking about Flin Flon and whether they were aware of this being an in-joke about Goldberg clearly not actually being fat. I can't decide.
But I was a fan of Bill Goldberg. I really liked the cold opening. It hinted at something more. And unfortunately, like I said, it probably just blew all its budget on that, or whether they filmed it at the end, I don't know. But yeah, I really liked that cold opening. I thought it was good. And I was a fan of, keep butchering her name, but Emily the Raven, Mary Mac Mackenzie. Mm-hmm. I was a fan of her for many reasons. The one being, obviously, I thought she did quite well with what she was given in this. She was outgoing. She was fun. Like the little jokes where she's like, he's scary, but informative. Like when he's telling him about the site. So she was good. And like,
her and Douglas Smith as Nick Ulson, they do actually have quite a bit of chemistry. Yeah, I did quite like them on screen together. Like again, some of the dialogue is purely mental, but fundamentally they worked on screen for sure.
Yeah. And coming from, when did I watch this? So I would have been 22, because I did watch this in 2005. That was the first and only time I've seen it. Thought she was hot.
Yeah, that's completely fair enough. Yeah, pretty cool. But yeah, for sure. But yeah, as you said, like, I don't actually have too much of an issue with any of the cast. As you said, like, for all the, if I sit down and I'm being critical, I'm like, it's ridiculous that Tommy Lister Jr. is in this film, that James Caan is in this film, like Chris Kattan's in this film. But when you watch it, like, it's fun that you've got this completely bonkers cast of characters kind of sitting alongside a relatively well thought out core cast. Like, I quite liked Robert Culp as grandpa. And as I said, I like Douglas Smith as the aptly named Nicholson Yulson. Again, a little bit on the nose, if you're looking for the big surprise in this film. And Emily de Ravin as Raven as well. I thought they were all pretty good. So cast-wise, not bad.
Yeah. What's he hates?
Hates. What's that?
You can only have 3.
Okay, we can have 3. Okay, I'm going to be very selective here. It will be the wasted concept, as we say. I think it's a good concept. I thought it was a solid opening. It never quite lives up to that, and it's never quite as good as the idea is, sadly. But hopefully, as we said, Violet Night will live up to what this film at least could have been on paper. My biggest issue, number 2, is the flat direction. Like, that really killed me. Like, the film is just visually never interesting, and Bill Goldberg's never as scary as he should be. And again, I know it's a horror comedy, but you look at the best ones. I'm thinking of like the Krampus or something. It's like, it can be funny, but the whole point is that it should also actually be scary. Yeah, if you shoot this in the right way, like, I just think there's another film where Goldberg is genuinely terrifying rather than, let's be clear, slightly goofy in this film.
I feel for David Steinman though, because he had a great concept. And I don't think his direction was terrible. I just wonder if it was because it was his first film, and as we've said, his one and only film now. I wonder if there was a lot of over-the-shoulder stuff. Maybe not from Brett Ratner, but a lot of people just telling him what they want, kind of thing. I don't know if it's all David Steinman, but like I said, it was his. I don't know what his background is. I don't know whether he went to film school or anything, or whether it was just they gave him a chance. So whether or not they gave him a chance and it kind of fell flat for them, I don't know. But I kind of feel if he had some more opportunity, maybe he could have done something
Oh, and
better.
just be clear. I'm not saying he's necessarily like some terrible director. I'm not like shitting on the director. Well, maybe a little bit, but no. Really, what I'm saying is like it was clearly a choice to kind of direct it and shoot it in this style.
Yeah,
and I thought it would have been more interesting if it kind of leaned into the horror elements of it a little bit. It just, as I said, without being like, rather than me shitting on saying, oh, it's not technically brilliant, what I'm saying is it's more disinteresting, I found it. Yeah. Like the directorial style. That was like competent, but not particularly interesting. And again, when it's your first role, maybe you are just trying to make it competent above all else kind of thing. But, and I know we can blame like budgets. This clearly wasn't a particularly expensive film. But you see some directors out there who make these films for a very limited budget, and the magic they're able to kind of weave on screen is unbelievable, where you're like, this costs like, $100,000 or something. And you're like, they've made it look so inherently cinematic. The problem with this is that it never looks particularly cinematic. I think I mentioned earlier, it looks like a kind of daytime soap, but with kind of evil Santa thrown into it. And maybe, again, that was a choice, it's supposed to be this everyday world, and then you're throwing these fantastical elements in. But for me, it didn't quite work.
Were you able to find anything about the budget? Because I couldn't find anything.
No, I couldn't find jack shit. I could find very little on the director. There wasn't. I'll be very interested to hear your facts on this, because I couldn't find jack shit, basically. But just to run through the last one, it's just the fact that this film never lives up to the cold opening. That the best bit's the start. Like, when you see these characters, and as I said, I think most of there are a few later on in the film, but most of the most imaginative deaths are in the opening sequence, and it just never lives up to that the promise of the opening section, which is a bit of a shame. And like even some of that's very confusing. Does one of the girls faint to death? That's what it felt like.
I think so.
Like in fairness, he's not messing around though. Like when he rocks up and the first thing he does feels like a ballsy move nowadays. When the first thing he does is kill the dog, or at least boot it across the room. I was just like, holy shit, he's not fucking round.
Santa is evil.
Like, yeah, he is evil.
You want to make Santa evil?
You kill all those people and you're evil. You kill a dog and you're like, holy shit, dude, this guy is fucked.
Yeah, you are the evilest piece of shit ever if you do.
Yeah, 100%.
So, like, I kind of gave this film a bit more leeway than you. We know from my film choices in previous pasts, I have a different take on. But yeah, there are, like I said, the fact that after the cold opening, everything kind of fell flat, killing wise and things. It just and as much as I said I liked Bill Goldberg on screen, I thought he was. It's a random one that I also not hated, but he couldn't deliver his lines. He was great. He was physically imposing on screen, but he couldn't carry the dialogue for me. He couldn't.
He wasn't. Again, it kind of all leans into this idea that he's never quite as threatening as he should be. He should be more terrifying, and whether it be a combination of writing, direction, and his limited range as an actor. But as I said, when he starts just randomly hissing at people, I'm just like, well, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. But never quite as scary as he would look on the poster, that's for sure.
And finally, I don't know if it's just me not being Canadian, but a Zamboni isn't scary.
No, what it reminded me of is something more like Austin Powers. When he's getting run over super slowly, he's like, yo! And then they cut to a wide shot, and the steamroller is like a mile away and traveling at like 2 miles per hour. That's what a Zamboni is. It's incredibly Canadian for sure, which I appreciated. But I feel like I could probably get away from a Zamboni relatively easily.
It brought me back to Deadpool, where it's the scene and he's going, I'm going to kill you with a fucking Zamboni. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, again, it's like, if you have a Canadian involved, there's got to be nods to hockey, of course. Yeah. But yeah, that whole sequence where they decide to kind of like hide in the ice rink, but just sit on the ice. It's like, dude, that's the worst place. That's not a hiding place. That is sitting out in the open. Yeah. It's a very strange choice. But obviously they were like, well, we've got to get the Zamboni into this.
So if it was a school, they hid in the school, and then Angel Grandpa came down, would he then be locked in the school? Or is he linked
on the ice rink?
Like, imagine if they hid in the school and they had that, and he's in the ice rink going, well, no, they should be here. Like,
all I can think with the grandpa thing is the whole idea, which they hinted at, that he had given up his angel powers because he loves his grandma, yeah? So now that he was dead, he couldn't have that kind of human life anymore. So basically, he couldn't go out into the world. Why that was so specifically had him kind of like, I can't go beyond this ice rink, I still don't know. But I can only assume that's what they're trying to get at. But there are, like I said, there are a lot of things in this film where I'm like, I kind of know what they're trying to get at, but it still doesn't make any sense.
No, that's all.
No.
Last
hate?
That
What was that, sorry?
I said I still had fun with this film. But no, that was my last hate.
Oh, I do apologize. In terms of favorite scene, I think we're both going to say the same thing, right? It's the beginning. Yeah. We don't need to run you over that again. Nope. Did you actually find any facts for this film?
Yeah, I got a couple. I mean,
awesome.
they're all pretty pony, but I got a couple. So the old book that explains the origin of Santa Claus is written in Icelandic. Some believe that parts of the Santa mythos are taken from Norse legends.
That's weird. It's a bit all over the place, isn't it? Because they're clearly leaning into it being like, he's Norwegian. I'm sure at one point you actually see a Norwegian flag, but then like, this is Icelandic. They're just going across the board, aren't they? Finnish. It's all kind of Scandinavian. It doesn't really matter.
In classic style of any wrestler being in film from 80s up until early 2000s, they had to say their catchphrase or do their iconic move. At the end of the credits, Bill Goldberg's reading a list and he looks at the camera and says, "Who's next?"
Yeah, he does. Yeah, which is, it does feel like one of those kind of needless lines. But at least they left it to the end of the credits. It was a shame because he doesn't do a spear at any point in this film, does he?
No, he doesn't.
No. I mean, which feels like a slightly missed opportunity.
The jackhammer, I would have groaned if I would have seen him do a jackhammer in this. But definitely in the strip club, he could have just speared that guy through a...
Why he didn't? Because, like, let's be clear, like, most of them feel quite forced. Like, if you've got, like, I don't know, fucking a suburban commando with Hulk Hogan and suddenly he's doing a leg drop, it feels really forced. But the spear is such a, like, that was the cool thing about it. It was a really simple move, but it felt like, and I hate this word, but I'm going to use it, like, it felt super visceral and violent. It's like when he hit people with that spear, you're like, I don't care how much this is set up. That looks like it fucking sucks. Yeah. And then if Santa goes and does that spear, but he spears someone like through a wall or something like that, it would have been totally badass.
You had just spearing.
Like, honestly, I would have taken the line as well. If he comes into that strip club and he's not so goofy and he spears someone through a wall and then like they get like impaled on a spike and then you look like the rest of the room is shocked and he looks around and he's like, "Who's next?" You'd be like, "Dude, that's fucking badass." Again, another missed opportunity.
We have just directed, no offense to David Steinman, we've just directed a better scene in the strip club than there was on.
Like I said, I would have like left less goofy humor, more violence and horribleness. But yeah, what can you do?
Randomly, Santa's Sleigh, this was the name of the movie within the movie in Ernest Saves Christmas.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Dude, we should totally do Ernest Saves Christmas. I fear for, like, I remember watching that when I was really young and I loved Ernest Saves Christmas and Ernest Scared Stupid, I think was the Halloween one. I suspect going back, it might be fucking rough. But yeah.
I've never seen an Ernest film.
Have you not?
Never.
That's probably just fine, but it might be fun to return to one. Or it might be terrible. We'll find out one day for sure. So
Santa Claus is venerated as a saint by several Christian denominations as St. Nicholas. Ironically, Bill Goldberg, who portrays Santa, is an observant Jew, even going as far as famously refusing to work on the Jewish high holidays during his football and wrestling days.
Fair enough. Yep. Fair enough. Again, it's so important. I really do feel, especially in 2022, that going to this film, that a lot of people are Jewish and they're clearly cool with the jokes because there are some odd lines in this film for sure.
Right. Bill Goldberg met his wife on this movie, Wanda Ferreton. Wanda Ferreton is a stunt woman or was a stunt woman. So I don't know, the only stunt women, unless she doubled for Mac.
Yeah, maybe.
He would have been in the strip club. So, but what's funny is she only agreed to do the movie because she erroneously thought it was a movie starring Jeff Goldblum.
That's amazing. She thought Jeff Goldblum. No, it's Bill Goldberg. Okay, I'll marry him. This is fine. This is absolutely fine. And it's so cool.
I mean, that is, and I hate this word, but that is the meet cute of meet cutes, isn't it?
Yeah, I hate that word too, but yeah, I think you're absolutely bang on there. It is the meet cute of meet cutes. Like, you're not, like, if you're telling your little story, you're not beating that one. There's no way. Because in this story, you're also Bill Goldberg, which is just fucking badass.
You said you couldn't find a lot of trivia for this, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is how there is not much trivia when it comes to this petty, right? In the first scene at the deli, Mrs. Talbot dumps 17 quarters on the counter to pay for a sandwich before taking one back. Her total was $4.50. She only paid $4.
I honestly, mate, when I saw it, I was like, that looks a little bit shy. That looks a little bit shy. I was like, is that on purpose? Because she's a shithouse, and she clearly is a shithouse. Although, funny enough, yesterday, after watching the movie, when driving to Sainsbury's to do the shopping, I saw a woman who looked just like her. She was driving a car. The car was too big for her. She was an old lady, and she had a cigarette hanging out of her mouth as well. I was like, you don't see those characters very much anymore. But I did see one out in the wild yesterday. As to whether she was run off the road by evil Santa, I don't know. Seems unlikely, but
we both missed this. When Santa invades the heaven-sent delicatessen, he attacks Mr. Green by diving through the glass counter and tackling him. The movie is a spear.
Oh, maybe it is. Yeah, maybe I've missed that. Maybe I
maybe feel like because he did it through the glass. I don't know.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. Whatever. They definitely undersold it if we couldn't remember it. Like, that should have been the cornerstone of the film. They should have built the film around the concept of Santa spearing someone to death.
For a film that was 75 minutes long, there was 41 deaths.
Was there that many?
Yes.
See, again, not enough of them landed. Like, I'm thinking like the police station. There was a lot of death there, but none of it really got my attention. And they kind of got caught halfway between comedy and horror. And a lot of people just kind of died, which is a weird sentence to say. But if you'd asked me how many people got killed in this film, I would have said like, I don't know, fucking 15, maybe.
Yeah, a couple,
I'm amazed that it's that many. And again, it speaks to the fact that this film doesn't quite have the impact that it should, that I really couldn't remember. I couldn't, outside of that opening sequence where he kills what, like 5? Maybe 6 if you include the dog, I don't know. Outside of that, I'm like, dude, I could probably remember like 3 or 4 more deaths after that, which is a bit, well, 4 or 5 at least. Maybe I'm underselling it, but yeah, I never in a million years would have guessed 40 fucking 1.
This is my last trivia, right? This is my last fact. And this is, as we've already said it, proof that Santa is a shite bag. Unlike other movies, where they usually survive an entire horrific series of events, Santa's first victim in this movie is actually a dog. So, yeah, in the facts, they've even turned around and said, yeah, Santa kills a dog.
Well, that was legitimately a shock. And I was like, oh, this is going to be, like, legit. Like, he comes in, he fucking smashes the dog across the room. I was like, all right, this is going to be super violent, super fun. I was like, even if it's kind of bad, it'll be like this imaginative selection of kills. And there are, like I said, there are a few. I just don't think enough of them land, sadly. But what can you do? In terms of legacy, I mean, this is one of many quite bad Christmas comedies. I think its greatest legacy will probably be Violent Night. The fact that I'm not saying outright that they definitely watched this film, but there are so many similarities in terms of the concept. And I know this isn't the first movie to do like the evil Santa thing, but even like the imposing nature of like, you know, the guy playing Santa, the fact that he was a Viking rather than a kind of Nordic demon and stuff like that, there are similarities. So I'm going to say its greatest legacy is that it led to Violent Night, which I suspect is going to live much longer in the memory.
Because usually with the Killer Santa things, it's just a guy dressed as Santa. But Violent Night in this, these are actually Santa.
Yeah, there are quite a few films. Like I think I mentioned earlier something like, what the hell's the movie? Is it Deadly Games, the French film? That's a film where a dude is dressed as Santa. It's a very different beast. Yeah. This legitimately is Santa. Yeah. And usually when they do the Santa thing, Santa's like, you know, an obvious comparison is like the start of Die Hard with Lee Majors. But in that, no, he's not. Is he Santa? No, he just helps Santa, right? In that.
Yeah, Lee Majors helps Santa.
Yeah, he's not actual Santa, but yeah, Santa is usually just a good guy, or something, like you said, someone dressed as Santa. But this is evil Santa, undoubtedly. So I would say, yeah, the most obvious legacy is how this has probably led to Violent Night in one way or another. In terms of score and soundtrack, we did nod to this. I thought we were going to get a lot of classic Christmas songs with Bill Goldberg killing over the top of them. I thought this will be fun. But then they just absolutely, no pun intended here, slayed a huge number of Christmas songs. It was like they were trying to make Christmas songs in as many different styles as possible, with nothing connecting them other than the fact that they were all fucking horrible. This film has some of the worst music, and I love Christmas music, and maybe that's why I am so put out about it. It's so bad. The opening credits song is bad in and of itself. whoever is singing it, I can only assume it's their first go at singing. It's terrible. The end credits, the song there, appalling. The rap song in the middle, really bad. And as I said, they do kind of combine this with a handful of just classic Christmas songs. So yeah, the score and the soundtrack for this is bananas. But that Bye Bye Santa song at the end credits, it's like, it's so I wouldn't even say it's laughably bad because it grates on me so much. I mean, I thought the worst thing I was ever going to hear was the end credit sequence or end credit song to A Princess Bride. A fantastic film.
I knew you were going to mention Princess Bride.
Well, it's a terrible song, Rob.
Great.
I don't care what you say. That song's
great.
terrible. It's terrible. This is worse. I mean, it's not as egregious because the film is, needless to say, I don't think I'm going out, on a whim here by saying, out on a limb, Jesus Christ.
Limb.
Out on a limb. Thank you very much. Supposedly. I don't think I'm going. Oh Jesus! Don't confuse me now. I don't think it'd be too shocking for me to say this film isn't quite as good as A Princess Bride, but yes. The song, in the strip club as well, and I quite like the strip club sequence. It's very dumb. But there's I don't know if they're trying to go for this 60s homage. It's they're oh, what happens if the Beatles did a Christmas song, but the Beatles were also shite? It's all very strange. So I'm not sure if you have. What's that?
So the Monkees.
The Monkees. Yeah, it does actually sound a little bit like the Monkees in fairness. But no, it's a bit of a missed opportunity because, again, I really like that tonal choice at the start of the film when it was a classic Christmas song with all the violin kind of overlaid. But instead, they've bottled that and decided to go with an array of truly horrendous Christmas originals, shall we say.
Yeah, it wasn't the best to me.
No, it wasn't the best. In terms of video games, unsurprisingly, there isn't a video game. The obvious thing, and we've used this a few times, would be something like Dead by Daylight or Friday the 13th, when you can either play as the kids or you can play as Santa. But instead, I was like, all right, if we're really going to go big budget on this, I'm thinking Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, where Bill Goldberg, basically you get a mod and replace Mr. X or Nemesis with Bill Goldberg. And you get the version of this film I wanted, where you can't even kill Bill Goldberg. He's totally terrifying. And, you replace Raccoon City with Hell Township, or you replace Spencer Mansion with the school. So you're stuck in the school, it's elaborately created. It's not, unsurprisingly, a direct kind of take on the movie. And you just have this invincible Bill Goldberg. And when I was thinking of that, I was like, yeah, but what are you going to be doing for the only reason that works in those games is because there's a threat outside of Mr. X or Nemesis, and they can just show up and be terrifying. But if we bring those fucking evil elves back in, that's what can be your kind of daily, moment-to-moment threat. So you've got to deal with the goblins, but then every so often, Bill Goldberg with his giant bison or hell reindeer, whatever you want to call them, shows up, and you've basically just got to run away. So I'm going to have Capcom make in this game. It's going to be really big budget, and of course, it's never going to happen. But
we've gone totally different ways.
I thought we might have on this one.
I would take Rockstar.
Okay, yeah. Well, we are going the same way in terms of budget. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Rockstar and Bully.
Oh, Bully's a good shout.
Yeah, Bully. So instead of Bully, obviously, you're Santa, and you're just going around the town taking people out.
Yeah, I quite like that idea. I'm trying to think of something where, there are certain games when you can just kill people. So it's quite easy to quote unquote complete the game as Bill, you're playing as Santa, for instance.
Yeah.
But you get bonus points for killing them in imaginative ways. Yeah. So every room you go into, there's a whole host of different things you can use, and you can have knock-on effects and combos and multipliers. Yeah. So you just go around killing all these people in Hell Township, and you've basically got to kill out the entire town. But it's score-based as well, so you've got to do it in as imaginative way as possible.
It'd be like a cross between Bully and Hitman.
Yeah, or Devil May Cry if you really wanted to go to town, I suppose. But to bring it back to Capcom. But I think those are two pretty solid ideas between that and our kind of strip club scene. If ever they're going to make a Santa Sleigh too, I think they know who to call.
Yeah.
That's a pretty solid idea here. But this is going to be the interesting part, the recommendations and the scoring, because inexplicably this bastard recommended it to me. So I'm going to go first and defiantly say, no, I don't recommend this film. It's just not very good, sadly. And scoring, ooh, I think it might be a 1. I think it might be our first one. I was just like, every time I look back, I was like, it's just a pretty bad movie from start to finish. So yeah, I'm going to go with not recommending, and sadly, a 1-star movie.
This is a rare one, right? Because I would recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
I would. Like, I would.
Yeah, no, I actually understand that.
People to watch it because it's fun. It's shit in the greatest way. It's fun. But
see, that's my issue. I don't think it's quite bad enough to be good. I don't think it crosses over. I don't think it's not quite silly enough. It's not quite violent enough. It's not even quite bad enough.
Yeah, I know.
It's just kind of competent, and it just kind of sits there. And the whole time I'm just like, I almost wish it was a little bit more shit, because then it would be fun and I'd be able to like cross over. But instead, it's just not very good, which is the worst kind.
This is all coming from the guy that gave Karate Kid 4 stars. You know what I mean? So, no. I
wonder. No, legitimately, are you the first person who's ever compared the Karate Kid to Santa Slays? On Earth. Is this the first time it's ever happened? Probably. Is that the first time that sentence has ever been said?
How many people have actually watched this film?
Yeah, dude, I tell you what, I'm not sure about this film, but I tell you what, I prefer it to Karate Kid. That's for damn sure. Well, that's an odd sentence. I don't know why you're bringing up Karate Kid alongside Santa Slay, but fair enough, I guess.
Definitely. Anytime I can get in a dig that Karate Kid is shit, I'm going to go for it. I would recommend it to others, but it's a 2-star film.
I think that's fair enough. I think I was talking to my wife before this, and I was like, I've got a funny feeling, like, objectively approaching this film, I don't think you're going to be able to give it more than 2 stars. But like, I know you've suggested to me, but when we're talking about recommending, we really are talking about just other people. If you're just talking in the pub with a bunch of friends, would you recommend this film? And I can understand that, because it is dumb, and especially with certain friends, like, dude, Bill Goldberg plays Santa. Like, for a lot of people, it's like, that actually sounds pretty fucking awesome. Yeah. But as I said, for me, it just never went far enough in one direction. As I said, for all my criticisms, it's not a truly terrible film, but also that's kind of the problem. It's never quite good enough, never quite bad enough, blah, blah, blah. I've already covered those bases. But yes, for me, sadly, no recommendations and a 1 star. Nice. That might be the only time this happens. But at the same time, did I enjoy watching it? Kind of, because it was like, in my head, I'm like, I can't believe Rob picked this. But I did enjoy it in like a certain, like, kind of masochistic way, I suppose.
Yeah. And this is it, see, and this is why I love, like, doing these little seasons. Like, we do Halloween, we do Christmas, because you can get all these random ones. It's not just all these lovey-dovey or ones that people have, like Home Alone or Gremlins. Films I absolutely love. We did last year. I love them. But then you get these random ones, and you go, do you know what? Santa's Sleigh, covering it any time of the year, might be fun to do, but the fact that it's technically still a Christmas film, well, it's Santa.
Oh, it's 100% a Christmas film. But yeah, that's the point.
And this is what's going to be good about this season that we're doing this year. The choices are completely batshit from one person, and then pretty much laid down for the next person, which takes us on to what we're doing.
Yeah, my choice is much more traditional. I would argue a far safer bet. However, I feel that Rob might not have the same opinion as me, and let's be clear, the rest of the world, when it comes to A Muppet's Christmas Carol. I mean, I haven't seen this for, I don't know, 12 months, because I watch it every fucking year like so many other people. So I feel pretty safe in the knowledge that this film still absolutely, I almost said slays again there, but it is a fantastic film. But Rob might not feel the same way. So we're not going to say any more about that now, because I feel like we are
going to say one more thing. Only ever seen it once.
Okay, well, this is going to be interesting to see if you go back to it, because this is, unlike Santa's Sleigh, for instance, this is the very other end of the spectrum. This is a genuinely beloved Christmas film. Like, if you're looking at any list of the greatest Christmas films of all time, this film is invariably right at the top. Like, it really is, like, top-tier Christmas movie stuff. However, does everyone feel the same way? We'll find out. And like you said, a film you haven't seen for quite a while, and you've only seen once.
Yeah, I mean, when did I watch it? I probably watched it late 90s, so...
Oh, so a real while then.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of musicals.
Oh, fair enough. Well, just more reason for you to potentially hate this film. But dude, I'm going to be amazed if you go back and rewatch this film and you don't find it utterly charming.
I mean, that's the thing, though. Do I? And I love using this word. Do I become a total shite bag and just not like it just to wind you up?
Just to wind you up.
Do I watch it objectively?
Well, no, because that's the thing we always try to do on this podcast is that combination of part of it is us speaking objectively about it, and that comes into the rating system where we really do try and kind of name out, okay, this is an objective review at the end. But when we're talking, it's always a combination of the two. Part of it is me talking objectively about the film, but we can, the whole point is we can never remove the nostalgia. Like you said with this film, objectively, you recognize Santa Sleigh is quite a bad film, but you still enjoyed it. And there's no point in just talking about it objectively. That's part of the fun of it. It's like, okay, I can objectively understand and appreciate that this film is a poorly made piece of crap, dare I say. But it's silly and fun, and you enjoyed it. And, it's a film you have an attachment to because you watched it back in 2005. So that's fine. I suspect a lot more people would suggest that Muppets Christmas Carol is both objectively and a nostalgic level very good, based on the greatest Christmas story of all time. I also
expect people are going to be looking at our list and go, what the fuck are these guys on?
Oh, yeah. If you look, we're basically doing 4 movies over Christmas, and needless to say, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to guess which ones I've picked and which ones Rob picked at a glance, dare we say. Mine are a touch more traditional.
I mean, in my defense, the next one that I do will be set after Christmas, so...
Yeah, I don't know why I thought you were going to say, in my defense, I am a lunatic, so what am I going to do? So, on that statement, thank you for joining us for Santa Sleigh, quite possibly the only Santa Sleigh podcast ever created. I can't say that definitively, but it might well be the case. And please do join us next week for a much more traditional Christmas look at Muppets Christmas Carol. So, thanks, guys. Much appreciated.
Thanks, guys. We'll catch you next week.
So where can people actually find us?
Oh, well, people can actually find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. You can also drop us an email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. We like to read them out on the show, so please feel free to send them in. Any recommendations, just get in touch with us. We do like that. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing.
Cheers, Darry. And a big thank you to Alexander Ortolan for the awesome intro music. He has no media presence as far as I can tell. He's very mysterious, but makes great music. So thank you very much.
And we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Bye.